What's happening, y'all? Corey Buschlen from Fantasy Stock Exchange coming at you to bring you the Week 16 DFS recap. A lot more scoring this week than we had last week, so we got a lot to get into. As you guys know, as I do every Monday, I break down the Sunday Million winner on FanDuel, the Millionaire Maker winner on DraftKings, as well as recap my own lineups, figure out what I could have done differently, maybe some of my process, review some of that, go over some of the stacks, ownership percentage, and things of that nature. As always, if you guys want my advice, you can go to the Draft Sharks website every Saturday. You will get my GPP picks for FanDuel and for DraftKings. So let's get into this. We have the DraftKings Millionaire Maker winning lineup, B. Morella. No surprise that they had a Joe Burrow stack, but I think what's interesting here is that they had a pretty much just an onslaught of that game. They had Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. So like the premium 4-stack of Bengals, weapons that is going to score fantasy points. They all hit in this game. You run it back on the other side with Mark Andrews. And I talked about coming into the week in my article, one of my biggest hits this week was definitely the Joe Burrow stuff because I was really heavily invested in Joe Burrow this week. I talked about the fact that with Mixon coming into this game banged up, he was, dealt with an injury in week 15. Did practice for the most part all week, but he still was dealing with an ankle injury. The Bengals threw 38 and 40 times in the two games that Joe Mixon came into a game questionable. So I really thought that they were going to lean on the pass in this game. And just from a game planning perspective, it makes sense to throw against this team rather than run against it because their secondary was just absolutely just decimated with injuries. And they lost another corner in this game. So great on this guy for recognizing that. Ownership wise, I think this guy did a great job as well. You eat the chalk really with Justin Jackson. He was going to always be a very, very popular play this week at 4,200, getting the Austin Eckler workload, quote unquote. He is the guy that definitely takes up the most ownership of your lineup. But outside of that, Jamar Chase was really the only other guy that was projected for decently high ownership. Everybody else is under control, pretty sub 10% on everybody except for Burrow, Chase, and Justin Jackson. And then Damian Harris, I think, was a very sharp play. I wish I would have attacked that more. I did have a hunch that Damian Harris would be good, so I played him in one lineup, but I wish I would have played him a little bit more across the board because he was a very good price, and he also was a good pivot off of some of the more popular options this week with Ramondre Stevenson out. So congrats to this guy. I think he really built out his lineup in a really smart way. He pays up at defense a little bit to get a little bit different, even though the Eagles defense was going to be popular. Getting an expensive defense usually helps you differentiate yourself from a lot of people. The Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase stack was brilliant. Obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals moving the ball as much as they did could lead to some scoring opportunities for Joe Mixon. That's exactly what happened. 2 touchdowns for him in that game, and then T. Higgins just goes hog wild for him in this one. So great job for that guy. Braxton Berrios, also a really sharp play for him. Let's move on to my lineup. Now, I would say overall, in terms of like how many takes did I get right this week versus wrong, I think I had a good week overall, but the problem was I couldn't really get a lot of combinations to go well together. So this was my best lineup in terms of my overall winnings. This was a $10 contest. So I 3.5x my initial investment in this contest. I got the Joe Burrow to T. Higgins stack, and I also stacked him up with CJ Uzomah and ran it back with Marquise. So again, I did have the right process. I thought the Bengals were going to throw the ball quite a bit. CJ Uzomah was heavily involved the first game against the Ravens. I figured they might go back to that. The Ravens were pretty weak against tight ends, and it was a cheap punt option for me to save some salary. So I really liked going Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, CJ Uzomah, fading Jamar Chase because I knew he would be the more popular of the Bengals wide receivers. So I think the process was sound there. I guess it just didn't really work out. And same goes for the Marquise Brown run back on the other side. Again, the process I think was sound there, but Mark Andrews got the majority of the production. Rashad Bateman catches a touchdown. Definitely didn't work out from that perspective. Hollywood Brown actually did have a end zone target that went off of his hands, so that could have worked out a little bit better for me. Javonte Williams, I think, was a great play this week. He just didn't happen to work out because the Broncos ran like 42 offensive plays. That game was just extremely slow paced, which is probably in hindsight not a good idea to be playing a game from that kind of game environment. But usually you figure in a game environment like that, it's going to favor the run. It's going to favor a guy like Javonte Williams. Again, probably worthwhile to attack more up-tempo, fast-paced games with higher scoring because we knew this game was going to be a little bit of a slugfest. The Stephon Diggs one-off, I think, was a brilliant call from my perspective. I think a lot of people were just going to be writing him off because Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp at the high end of wide receivers just had much better matchups than him. And just playing the guy that no one wanted to play because he had a bad matchup, I think is always a smart play when it comes to elite fantasy wide receivers like Stephon Diggs, because realistically, there is no bad matchups for a guy like that. So I think that was a pretty smart play from that perspective. And then I kind of onslaughted the Chargers offense with Justin Jackson and Keenan Allen. I figured they'd get a good share of the production in that game. Justin Jackson definitely worked out, but Keenan Allen not so much. And then the Chiefs defense playing against Big Ben was a pretty easy call to make. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that lineup. A couple, better decisions made by me. If I would have played, Damian Harris instead of Javonte Williams, and then I pivoted away from Keenan Allen to, Justin Jefferson or someone like that, I think that could have been a much better output, basically point output for me. Could have finished a little bit higher on the leaderboards, but I did still finish in 23rd out of about 400 people or so in this contest. So not a bad lineup overall. Moving on to the FanDuel side of things. And we have, again, a Joe Burrow stack that ended up taking home the Sunday Million winner. A little bit different than the other one. He just had the 3x1, the Burrow Higgins chase with Mark Andrews on the way back. This lineup, looking at it and looking at the ownership, and even just at the time, I think you could have gone into this week knowing that this lineup was going to be a little bit too popular, a little bit too chalky. When you have Alexander Mattison, Justin Jackson, and Cooper Kupp all in the same lineup, we knew that they were going to be three of the highest owned players in terms of total ownership on the entire slate. If I was this guy, I probably would have pivoted off of one of those guys. Now, again, he won the Sunday Million, so it obviously worked out for him. But just from a process standpoint, I think it probably would have been smarter to pivot off of one of them, whether you go from Madison to somebody a little bit more, low key, like a Joe Mixon or something like that, or you head off of Cooper Kupp and you go down to a guy like Stephon Diggs and pay up somewhere else. I think that probably would have gotten his cumulative ownership down a little bit. I'm okay eating two chalky plays and a couple other like mid-range plays, like what he did with Higgins and Jamar Chase, but you got a couple, really, really highly popular plays in this lineup. So I think overall, this was probably not ideal from an ownership perspective, but good on him for playing the right plays. Obviously, Rex Burkhead, I think, was very, very sharp. I wish I had seen that coming. Didn't really have as much time to dig into the slate, do as much research as I would have wanted to with the holidays this week, but I think Rex Burkhead was a screaming value in a great matchup with David Johnson out. I think that was great on the people that played him. So moving on to my own FanDuel lineup, and I really do like the construction of this lineup. It just didn't really work out for me. In my FanDuel article, I talked about going against the grain with Josh Allen. I talked about how if you can get a sub 10% Josh Allen with the ceiling that Josh Allen has, both from a rushing and from a passing perspective, give me that all day. Again, a lot of people were going to be scared off by the Patriots on the road, which is, viable to be concerned about that. But because of the ceiling, which is what we're chasing in GPPs, this is why you don't play this guy in a cash game. You play this guy in a GPP because a lot of people will be scared off by the New England Patriots. They're going to play Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, whoever else has better matchups. So that's why I really like the Josh Allen stack with Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox. That stack actually worked out pretty well. Ran it back on the other side with Damian Harris. Just the rest of my lineup let me down, obviously, with Cordero Patterson playing him as a one-off at 18%. I thought he was in a good spot to produce this week. Didn't necessarily come to fruition. Atlanta didn't really run a whole lot of offensive plays themselves either. And then Keenan Allen, I really liked as a one-off this week. He didn't work out. And T. Higgins obviously definitely did. But overall, between my primary stack and T. Higgins, this lineup definitely was carried by those guys. But I just made a couple wrong calls in other places. The New York Giants defense was just a whiff on my part. So overall, that this lineup construction, the framework is there. I just made a couple bad calls. If I had gone with, Joe Mixon instead of Cordero Patterson around that price range, obviously looks like a much better lineup. If I had gone with, Justin Jefferson instead of Keenan Allen, if I had gone up a little bit at defense, this lineup could have been a lot better. And same with Marquise Brown. I really liked Marquise Brown this week, and he let me down. Obviously, Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman took over the passing production. Even James Prochet got a decent amount of targets in that game. So if you guys did enjoy that video, as always, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the Giraffe Sharks YouTube channel if you are new. Check out the website for showdown tips for tonight, and also a lot of the other tools that we have going in the premium section. Again, stay tuned for next Saturday's articles. You'll be able to see my weekly GPP picks for both FanDuel and for DraftKings. Peace out, guys. I'll talk to you soon.